DINIJHT for 6 hours. The ship didn't speak. No alarms, no status chimes, no crew footsteps that Nora could count and name. Just the long mechanical breathing of an alien engine that sounded too steady to trust. The Starfang floated through an interstellar seam where light behaved strangely stretched thin, bent like glass under pressure. Outside the observation slit in her quarters, stars smeared into pale scratches. The void looked closer here, like it had learned a new way to lean. Nora kept the room dim. Amber floor strips at 4%, just enough to keep her from tripping over the medical crate bolted to the wall. Bright light made the metal feel weaker, as if illumination proved that there was something to lose. The Starfang wasn't human-built. The corridors weren't straight the way Earth ships preferred. Every passage curved just slightly, like a spine, built for bodies that moved with silent predatory confidence rather than cautious bipedal steps. The air smelled of mineral sterilizers, moss filtration, and a cold ion bite that clung to the back of her tongue. 6 months. 6 months since Earth had made a request they couldn't afford to refuse. 6 months since Nora had stepped onto a vessel crewed by the Karuan Apex predators, with fur like storm clouds and hands that ended in talons meant for ice cliffs and armored prey. The galaxy called them monsters. Nora called them coworkers. Most days she could even believe it. But quiet on a Karuan ship was not peace. Quiet was discipline. Quiet was a blade held still, and the threat was that it could move whenever it pleased. Nora sat on the edge of her bunk with her knees drawn up, a metal cup cooling in her hands. The herbal broth the Karuan provided tasted like bitter stone and smoke. Earth tea would have been better, but Earth tea didn't exist out here. Earth tea was a memory you swallowed and pretended it wasn't grief. She exhaled slowly and counted like her therapist had trained her to .1, .2, .3. Her heartbeat refused to match the numbers. It went faster anyway. The gravitational shear earlier had been milled enough to rattle drawers, enough to make the deck plates buzz under her soles. Not enough to damage the ship. Not enough to matter, they'd told her. But Nora had done military cross-training. She'd lived through simulations where not enough became vacuum screaming through your ribs. She reached up and tapped the cum panel beside her bunk. Bridge, she said softly. Status check. The panel waited half a beat too long. Before answering, stable, came the voice of an officer, low, controlled. Remain in quarters. Understood. The panel went silent again. Nora stared at it, then at the door, then at the dim light on the floor that made her room feel like a cave built by someone else. She didn't like being useful. Useful meant you were a tool. Tools got traded. Tools got left behind when the work was done. Earth hadn't sent her because she was brave. Earth had sent her because she was valuable in a way that could be measured. Xenobiologist, field medic, adaptable mammal, a human offer on the altar of diplomacy. Karun, navigation routes for Earth's dying colonies. Karuan, shipbuilding alloys for Earth's fragile fleets. And quietly, the beginning of an alliance that might keep Earth alive long enough to matter. Nora swallowed another mouthful of bitter broth and tried not to imagine the treaty documents with her name buried in their fine print like a signature made of flesh. A sound scraped the bottom edge of her door. Nora froze. The Karuan didn't make random noise. They didn't shuffle. They didn't fidget. They didn't hover outside quarters like nervous humans. Another scrape, soft, hesitant, too low to be an adult. Nora's throat tightened. The dim amber light suddenly felt too bright. In my face, she whispered. Her room's small ship assistant responded instantly. Command. It chimed in neutral trade voice. Reduce illumination 5%. The amber strips dimmed until her room became mostly shadow. The air felt colder. Or maybe that was her skin deciding to believe in danger. The scrape came again, small, insistent, like a claw testing the edge of a sealed den. Nora slid off the bunk, bare feet, silent on the deck plates. She moved the way humans moved when they didn't want to admit they were scared. Careful, slow, pretending caution was strategy instead of fear. Her hand hovered over the door. Release. She listened. No footsteps. In the corridor, no voices, only the ship's steady breath and that soft, uncertain scratch. Nora should have called security. Protocol demanded it. Cultural boundaries demanded it even more. Karuan were strict about their young. Sacred, protected, and never to be handled by outsiders. She had never been invited to their nursery wing. Not once in 6 months. But the sound at her door was too small to be threat. It was too small to be anything except. Nora pressed the release. The door slid open with a whisper. A furry face stared up at her. Huge eyes, gold-ringed and sharp, too intelligent for how young the body was. The cub's ears were flattened back, his mouth set in a line that looked like stubbornness, pretending not to be fear. Behind him, shadows shifted. More eyes, more small bodies, half hidden in the corridors dim. Nora's heart dropped into her stomach. Cubs, a whole litter. They weren't supposed to be here. The smallest cub sniffed the air with a seriousness that belonged on the bridge. His nose worked like a scanner, categorizing her scent into meanings. Foreign, human, familiar, safe, unsafe. Then he spoke in careful trade tongue, voice low and rough in a way that shouldn't exist in something so young. Human Nora. She stayed still. Yes, we could not remain. Nora crouched slowly, making herself smaller, palms open. What are you doing here? The cub's tail twitched, once sharp, restrained. Caretaker sleeps hard. Another cub, slightly larger, stepped forward into the thin line of amber light. His fur was darker, his brow marked with a pale stripe. She fell, he said. Nora's breath caught. Fell, not dead. The striped brow cub clarified, as if annoyed she'd assume weakness meant death. Quiet, no wake. A third cub pressed behind them, eyes wide and shining. The ship roared, he whispered, dark pressed. The gravitational shear. To Nora. It was physics. 2 cubs raised on a death world of ice and predators. It was the sound of something huge stepping onto the roof of your den. Nora glanced down the corridor. Empty. But adults would notice soon. Sensors would log her door opening. Patrols would find paw prints where there shouldn't be. Karuan protocol would demand the cubs returned. Paperwork would become politics. Politics would become blame. And blame a ship where humans were guests, and bargaining chips would become dangerous. But in front of her stood for small bodies, trembling with the effort of trying not to tremble. Karuan cubs didn't seek comfort from outsiders, not unless something had broken. Okay, Nora said softly. the word coming out like a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. "Come inside." Quickly, they slipped past her in a smooth rush, silent as spilled water. Even frightened, they moved like predators born, already knowing how to stalk without sound. Nora sealed the door. The cubs immediately began investigating, not playing, assessing, sniffing corner seams, checking under her small table, watching the vents like something might crawl from them. One climbed onto her chair and sat upright like it was a lookout post. The smallest cub remained closest to Nora, shoulders high, ears pinned, like he was guarding her as much as seeking shelter. Nora swallowed hard. She'd studied Karuan pack behavior for months, learned silent signals, hierarchies, rituals of trust. She knew that cubs, this young, required warmth and proximity the way humans required oxygen, security, contact, a heartbeat close enough to anchor their own. She lowered herself to the floor, cross-legged, hands resting open on her knees. "Come here," she said. The smallest cub hesitated. His nose worked, pulling her scent into pieces. Human, foreign, familiar, safe. He stepped forward and touched his nose to her wrist. A test. Nora didn't move. The cub's shoulders dropped a fraction. He pressed his side against her thigh. Nora's breath caught. She didn't reach for him yet. Letting him choose mattered. The others watched with predator focus, observing, calculating. One by one they approached, drawn by the fact that the smallest had decided. Within a minute, Nora found herself surrounded by warm fur and compact bodies. The cubs arranged themselves with instinctive efficiency, forming a tight cluster against her like their ancestors must have done on frozen worlds. Under merciless stars, their breathing slowed, their heartbeats steadied. A low rumble started purring, but deeper than any cat. It vibrated through Nora's ribs like the ship itself had learned tenderness. The striped brow cub mumbled something in Karuan and tucked his head against her shoulder. Nora finally lifted a hand and rested it gently on his back. The fur was thick, softer than it looked. Warm like an electric blanket, the smallest cub's voice came muffled from her lap. "Speak." Nora blinked. "What?" "Sound story," the cub clarified, as if the concept should be obvious. "Caretaker makes sound story when dark is loud." A story. They wanted a story. Nora's mouth pulled into a fragile smile that felt like it might crack. "What kind of story?" she asked. The smallest cub shifted closer. "Human pack." Nora's throat tightened. But not from fear this time, so she spoke. She told them about Earth, not the sanitized, diplomatic version. The real one that made her feel like she belonged to something other than agreements and corridors. She told them about oceans that could swallow cities, storms that tore trees from the ground like weeds, deserts that looked empty until you learned